When you think about power in the Philippines, you probably picture the news. Campaign rallies, politicians promising to serve the poor. But the real power isn't in those speeches. It's hidden behind massive iron gates in the most expensive zip codes on Earth. Locked inside 40-hectare seaside estates with private airstrips, guarded by lawyers. We're tracking the homes the government spent decades trying to prove even exist. From mountain hideouts to Manhattan towers, these are the secret billionaire mansions of the Philippines' most powerful political dynasties. Let's look inside the fortress. 5. Joseph Irap Estrada, the action star's cinematic luxury. To understand the style of the Estrada family, you have to look at the man who turned a movie career into a political machine. Joseph Irap Estrada was not born into money because he grew up in Tondo, a crowded and working-class neighborhood in Manila where the streets were narrow and the apartments were small, and the idea of owning a mansion was the kind of thing you only saw at the cinema. He became a movie star by playing the role of the underdog, and the tough guy who fought for the little people, and the masses loved him because of that image. He had the kind of screen presence that made ordinary Filipinos feel like someone powerful was finally on their side. He used that fame to become a mayor, and then a senator, and a vice president, and finally the president in 1998. He is the only man in the history of the country to walk off a movie set and straight into Malacanang Palace, and he brought that full Hollywood flair to every single one of his personal living spaces. But behind the scenes, the man who claimed to be for the poor was building a lifestyle that looked less like public service and more like a high-end film production that never stopped rolling. The main property was his mansion on Polk Street in Green Hills, and this place is a landmark of luxury because it spans 3 different lots and 3,000 square meters of some of the most prime real estate in the entire Metro Manila corridor. Inside, it is filled with very expensive crystal collections and antique wood furniture that was carved by hand by master craftsmen, and it served as the fortified headquarters where he held court for his political clan and his closest friends, and his most trusted allies across decades of influence. The scale of the entertainment that happened inside that house was staggering. He even renovated a huge part of it into a temporary palace for his mother's 95th birthday, and he added a grand piano and a professional-grade kitchen just for that single event. The architecture is a deliberate mix of classic Filipino design and the glitz of the entertainment world, which is exactly the visual language of a man who understood better than almost anyone how to make power look glamorous. But the Polk Street house was only the beginning of his design journey. The most famous property in his collection was the Boracay Mansion in Quezon City, and it sat on over 7,000 square meters of very expensive land in one of the most sought-after residential corridors in the capital. It earned that nickname because it had a swimming pool filled with real white sand imported from the beach and a machine engineered to produce artificial ocean waves at the touch of a button. While most people saw him as a simple actor who had stumbled into public life, he was in reality relaxing on a man-made beach in the middle of one of the most congested cities in Asia, surrounded by imported sand and high-tech wave engineering that cost more to install than most Filipinos would earn in several lifetimes. That image captures everything you need to know about how Irap understood luxury. He also had a mansion in Wack Wack that featured its own mini-theater and a full gym and a master bedroom with its own sauna and massage room built directly into the suite. The Wack Wack Palace sat on a 5,000 square meter lot and was designed with 3 different kitchens on the ground floor alone, so that he could host multiple parties simultaneously without the catering for one event ever crossing paths with the preparation for another. The mini-theater was fitted with high-end sound systems because he wanted to watch his own action movies in a room that replicated the experience of a public cinema, but with none of the public. The master bathroom featured a jacuzzi large enough for 4 people, and the sauna was lined with imported cedar wood sourced specifically for its grain and its heat retention. Every detail in every room of every property was a deliberate statement. This was not just a home. This was a monument to the idea that a man from Tondo could end up living better than the kings he once played on screen. If you think a man-made beach in the middle of the city is a big move, wait until you see the family that controlled the country's financial capital for 40 years and built an estate with a private lagoon. 4. The Binay family, the $1.2 billion stronghold of Makati. If you want to understand how a political dynasty defines luxury in the Philippines, you have to start with Makati City. This is the glittering financial heart of the country and the place where the headquarters of every major bank and corporation in the archipelago are concentrated into a few square kilometers of some of the most expensive urban land on Earth. For nearly 4 decades, the Binay family shaped this prestigious address and governed the most valuable real estate in the nation, with a grip that never loosened, regardless of who was sitting in Malacanang at any given time. As of early 2026, Nancy Binay serves as mayor of Makati, and this continues a remarkable run of family leadership that began in the 80s when Jojomar Binay first built the machine that would sustain this dynasty across multiple generations. But the real story of how this family lives is not found in the city towers or the government offices. It is hidden in the rolling hills of the Batangas countryside. The public first got a glimpse into the family's private world during the explosive 2014 Senate hearings when a former ally presented aerial photographs of a massive rural estate that very few people outside the family's inner circle had ever seen. This property is known as Hacienda Binay, and it covers 350 hectares in Rosario, Batangas. To put that scale in perspective, this single estate is roughly half the size of an entire Philippine city, and it does not function like a farm. It functions as a totally self-contained luxury compound designed to accommodate every possible need of the family without ever requiring them to interact with the outside world. Inside the massive gates lies a resort-style paradise with a large swimming pool and a resort deck built and landscaped to host the country's political and business elite at the highest possible standard of comfort and discretion. There is a 40-car garage for the family's high-end vehicle fleet and a man-made lagoon where they can go boating in complete privacy without ever leaving their own property. The engineering required to construct a working lagoon on private land in the middle of the Batangas Hills is itself a statement of how seriously this family takes the idea of building a world that operates entirely on its own terms. The family also developed a world-class orchid farm on the estate that features rare species flown in directly from South America and Europe, because horticulture has been a long-standing Binay family passion that predates the political career and outlasted the controversies. But the detail that genuinely shocked the Philippine public when it emerged during the hearings was not the lagoon or the orchids. It was the piggeries. These were not regular farm buildings because the animals were kept in climate-controlled facilities with high-tech cooling systems that maintained a precise internal temperature regardless of the weather outside. The level of investment required to air-condition a livestock facility on a private hacienda tells you everything about the standard of living. This family applies to every single layer of their compound. The hacienda is designed to feel like an exclusive private countryside resort, and it includes its own horse ranch and a dedicated fighting cock farm that reflects the deep cultural traditions the family has always maintained alongside their modern wealth. The main residence is a grand example of Spanish colonial architecture blended with modern comforts, and it features soaring ceilings and expansive verandas that capture the Batangas mountain breeze in a way that no air conditioning system could ever fully replicate. The interiors are filled with rare wood finishes and carefully carved furniture that reflect a deep sense of heritage and a refined taste that was built over decades rather than purchased overnight. Maintaining an empire of this size reportedly costs millions of pesos every single month, and that ongoing operational expenditure underscores the sheer scale of what the family built and continues to protect. The Binay Hacienda is a landlord's dream, but wait until you see the man who invited the world into his house to show off how simple he was while living a high-security minimalist lifestyle. 3. The Duterte family, the high-security modern minimalists. Rodrigo Duterte captured the attention of the entire nation in 2016 because he presented himself as something the Philippine public had almost stopped believing was possible in national politics. A simple man from the provinces. Someone with no interest in the trappings of the Manila elite and no desire to perform the rituals of old money. He famously invited foreign reporters and television cameras into his modest home in Doña Luisa village in Davao City, and he showed them his cheap mosquito net and his weathered old pickup truck and his basic kitchen with the straightforward ease of a man who had nothing to hide. The image of the no-frills tough leader worked perfectly, and it resonated with millions of voters who felt abandoned and overlooked by the capital's political class for generations. But behind that carefully constructed public image, the Duterte family was building a very different and far more contemporary definition of luxury. Their newer residences in Davao reflect a clean, high-security minimalist style that has become the unmistakable signature of the family's private life in the 2010s. These properties are located in the most exclusive gated enclaves in the city, including Woodridge Village and Royal Pines subdivision, addresses that require a level of financial clearance that most Davaoenos will never come close to achieving. The architecture of these newer homes is a complete departure from the mosquito net narrative because they feature sleek modern Asian designs with massive glass walls and open-plan layouts that flood every room with the natural light of the southern Philippine sun. These houses are built with smart climate control systems engineered specifically for tropical living, and they use expensive but deliberately understated materials that signal genuine wealth only to those who understand what they are looking at. The homes include large motor courts designed to accommodate serious luxury vehicle collections and private staff wings that ensure the family is always taken care of in total seclusion without the domestic operations of the household ever intruding on their personal space. They emphasize a lifestyle of ironclad privacy and layered security while still maintaining a meaningful connection to the outdoors through zen gardens and private courtyards that make the compounds feel open and serene, even as the perimeter walls keep everything outside completely invisible. Duterte himself once admitted on national television that he had received luxury properties as personal gifts from close friends, and these residences represent a major evolution in how a family that built its public brand on simplicity has chosen to actually live behind closed doors. The humble Doña Luisa house was eventually put up for sale in 2025, and that transaction marked the formal end of the Simple Man brand as the family transitioned fully into their more secure and architecturally refined estates. Even as their public roles shifted and the political landscape around them changed dramatically, their private life remained distinctly Southern because they blend a genuine love for local Davao cuisine and the relaxed communal traditions of the boodle fight with the kind of security infrastructure that most heads of state would recognize immediately. These family gatherings happen behind walls monitored by systems that are among the most technologically advanced in the country, and the contrast between the warmth of a shared meal on banana leaves and the sophistication of the surveillance network protecting that meal is the defining paradox of the Duterte private world. In 2026, with Sebastian Duterte serving as mayor of Davao and Sara Duterte maintaining a powerful national presence, the family continues to define a new kind of Southern power lifestyle that has no real precedent in Philippine political history. Duterte's minimalist fortress is a sign of the new power in the South. But wait until you see the man who is building an entire city and planting 1 million trees just to create a forest experience for the rich. 2. The Villar family, the Italian grandeur of the real estate. King Manny Villar built one of the most ambitious luxury empires in Philippine history, and the scale of what he created makes almost every other story on this list look like a warm-up act. He did not come from money. He came from the wet markets of Tondo, where, as a young boy, he helped his mother sell shrimp and fish in the heat of Divisoria, while mentally calculating a way out that most people in that market would never find. He found it through education, and then through sand and gravel trucks, and then through a revolutionary idea that changed the entire Philippine housing industry. Instead of selling lots and letting buyers figure out the construction themselves, he started selling complete house and lot packages through what became Camella Homes, and the concept transformed how millions of ordinary Filipinos thought about home ownership. That insight turned into Vistaland, which turned into the country's largest home builder, which turned into a political career that took him to the Speaker's chair in the House of Representatives and then to the presidency of the Senate. He used his business logic and his legislative position to create an empire that merges political influence and real estate wealth so completely that separating the two is essentially impossible. By 2026, Forbes had named him the richest individual in the Philippines with a net worth of $17 billion at its peak, and the infrastructure he controls touches almost every aspect of how people in this country live, shop, eat, and move through their cities. For the Villars, owning a single mansion was never the goal, because a single mansion is a ceiling, and the Villars have never believed in ceilings. They are building an entire city and calling it Villar City. This is a master development that covers 3,500 hectares across Metro Manila and the southern provinces, and it is the most ambitious private urban development project in the history of the country. The architectural vision for this empire draws its inspiration directly from the old-world coastal charm of Portofino in Italy. When you walk through their developments, you encounter cobblestone streets and signorial towers and cascading fountains that look like they were dismantled from a Renaissance Italian piazza and reassembled block by block on Philippine soil. The attention to European detail in every paving stone and every archway is not accidental. It is the deliberate visual language of a man who grew up with nothing and decided that when he built his world, it would look like the most beautiful places on earth. At the heart of this private empire lies Foresta, a 100-hectare estate where the family is executing a plan to plant 1 million trees inside a luxury residential development to create a total forest experience within the boundaries of a modern city. This is the Forbes Park of the South, and it is operating at a scale that makes the old money enclaves of the North look modest by comparison. Lots inside Foresta begin at 100 million pesos each, and there are only 5 residential lots per hectare, which means the privacy and the silence and the sheer breathing room available to the people who live there is something that money can buy almost nowhere else in the Philippine urban landscape. The Villars do not just own a house because they live in a world they literally designed and constructed from the ground up. From the Vista malls where they shop to the coffee project cafes where the family holds its business discussions to the all-home stores where the materials that built their empire are sold to ordinary Filipinos, every layer of their daily life exists within an ecosystem that carries the family name and generates returns for the family portfolio. The Villars built a city of Italian dreams, but the family at number 1 owns a global empire of palaces and a shrine that is a museum of the world's rarest art. 1. The Marcos family, the Philippine Baroque legacy. There is no story in Philippine history, and arguably in Southeast Asian history, that comes close to matching the scale, the ambition, and the sheer audacity of the Marcos family's real estate legacy. They did not simply build mansions. They created an architectural movement, and they called it a new society, and they turned their personal residences into physical manifestations of a national vision that was equal parts grandeur and control. Ferdinand Marcos Sr. ruled the Philippines from 1965 to 1986, and during those 2 decades he used the full weight of state power to construct a real estate empire that stretched from the mountain provinces of northern Luzon to the penthouse floors of Manhattan. The style that defined the Marcos era has been called Filipino Baroque by architects and historians, because it fuses the grandeur of Spanish colonial design with indigenous Philippine materials like Nara wood and hand-woven cane in a combination that feels simultaneously ancient and imperial. The most iconic example of this aesthetic is the Malacañang of the North in Payaway, Ilocos Norte, and it was built in 1977 as a deliberate tribute to the family's deep roots in the Ilocos region. This estate features expansive balconies called veladas that extend outward over the surrounding landscape, and ceilings of extraordinary height that were engineered to capture the lake breeze and create a natural cooling system inside rooms that were already designed to make every visitor feel small in the presence of power. It remains one of the most architecturally significant private estates in the country, and it is now a museum that receives visitors who walk through rooms that once hosted the inner circle of one of the most consequential political regimes in Asian history. Inside the Philippines alone, the family maintained at least 50 different mansions, and each one served as a commanding operational center for a different branch of the clan. In the summer capital of Baguio, they had a cluster of 9 houses spread across the cool mountain air and on a single street called Outlook Drive. 4 mansions sat side by side on 5 hectares of land reserved exclusively for the children and the family matriarch. The density of Marcos real estate on that single street is itself a kind of architectural declaration, a visual statement that in the hierarchy of Baguio's landowners, there was simply no comparison. The design language of these homes used rare Philippine hardwood carvings and imported European furniture to construct interiors that felt like they belonged to a European royal family that had decided to govern the tropics. But the most extraordinary and most culturally significant property in the entire Marcos portfolio is the Santo Niño Shrine in Tacloban, Leyte, and it is not correctly described as a house. It is a museum of the arts that happens to contain bedrooms. Imelda Marcos commissioned the shrine to function as both a residence and a living gallery, and the result is a building filled with French mirrors and Italian tiles and guest rooms that were individually designed to represent the distinct culture, materials, and artistic traditions of different regions of the Philippines. Every room is a different province. Every wall tells a different chapter of a national story that Imelda wanted the world to understand as evidence of Filipino civilization at its most refined and most ambitious. She had a passion for art and fashion and culture that was absolutely genuine, even as the methods used to fund that passion remained deeply contested, and she turned every residence she touched into a gallery that showcased some of the rarest objects in the world. The overseas empire was even more staggering in its ambition. The family purchased entire skyscrapers in New York City, including the Crown Building on Fifth Avenue and the Tower at 40 Wall Street. Acquisitions that were made with a level of financial confidence that only comes from operating at the intersection of state power and private wealth for 2 uninterrupted decades. They held estates in Long Island with 14 bedrooms designed for the kind of extended family occupation that turns a house into a compound. They owned mansions in London and villas in Rome that were all linked nodes in a global network of luxury real estate that was spread across 3 continents and funded from a country where the average annual income was a fraction of what it cost to maintain any single one of these properties for a single month. They even purchased a townhouse on East 66th Street in New York and converted the 6th floor into a private disco where they could entertain the global elite at a standard that matched the grandest social events of any capital city in the world. The image of that 6th floor, a private nightclub above a Manhattan townhouse owned by a Philippine political family, is the single most vivid illustration of what the Marcos Empire looked like at its absolute peak. It was not just wealth. It was the performance of wealth at a level that most billionaires today would find difficult to match even with modern resources. In 2022, the family returned to the same palace in Manila they had been forced to leave 36 years earlier. And by 2026, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. was the sitting president of the Republic of the Philippines, and the family was once again at the very top of the country's social and political hierarchy. The mansions have been repositioned as strategic assets in the family's long game of cultural legitimacy. Many of the old houses have been converted into tourist destinations and historical sites where the family's version of their own story is presented to the public as a record of Filipino achievement and architectural ambition. They have turned the properties into instruments of narrative control as effectively as they once turned them into instruments of political power. The Philippines is often called a paradise, but for these families, it is a private fortress. Which political dynasty shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments. And make sure you subscribe to Her Status for more hidden luxury dynasties.